I'm Nancy Duncan, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing a local superintendent of schools, and I have a lot of great questions for him that I hope he enjoys providing some answers. As this is an interesting time for schools and interesting time for everybody, but I think especially for schools because you're managing adult and children anxiety about all this. So I have the pleasure today of speaking with Thomas Aubin, who is the superintendent of the Westport Community Schools. So welcome, Tom.
Oh, it's great to be here, Nancy. Thank you for having us.
Oh, no problem. No problem. So let me just kind of start with what brought you into the field of education and how long have you been working in this field?
Well, it's an interesting question. Believe it or not, there was a show back in the 1970s called World at War. And it was narrated by Sir Laurence Olivier. And it was really something that caught me. And it caught me in so many different ways. And I think the biggest thing was I was always, and I can't believe how prescient it is today. You know, I was always like disturbed by what could lead a rational, educated group of people throughout the world, you know, to come to a conflict that would end in the, you know, and again, the numbers are sketchy, but, you know, in the death of 56 million people. Mm-hmm. You know, it's one of those things that always, you know, law of unintended consequences. So I would watch that, and I knew that I had a love for history, and you know, I thought to myself, boy, it must be very exciting doing this as a profession. So in the back of my mind, I was thinking, yeah, I think I would like to be a history teacher as early as grade 6. So,
oh wow.
That would have been 1974, not to date myself, but
no, not in this crowd. You won't.
No, God.
So how did you get your, you know, did you always work locally? Where did you start?
So I graduated from Diamond Regional. I graduated from the Culinary Arts program. I was working full-time as a 18-year-old, and I thought for sure that was going to be my pathway. And then, you know, I received my schedule for Southeastern Massachusetts University. And I thought, you know, this might be something I really want to pursue. And although I was completely unprepared for college, I went forward nonetheless, you know, and so my first teaching job, believe it or not, was in October of 1984. I was doing observations at Diamond where I graduated, and one of the history teachers who I had a deep respect for, a gentleman who just passed recently by the name of Mr. Al Medeiros, you know, he had said to me, why don't you put in an application to substitute teach? And I said to him, oh God, they'll never, you know, have me come in as a sub. And, you know, Mr. Medeiros had a very, very unique ability to get right to the quick. And he said that, you're right, if you don't put in an application, they absolutely will never call you. And then a month later, after putting the application in, I got the call. And, you know, one of my favorite stories, Nancy, is that I got the call. I was so excited. I said, absolutely. And then I realized I only owned one tie, you know, and this is a little embarrassing, but I'm self-effacing at my age. It had a Playboy bunny on it.
Oh,
and so I had to take a black magic marker and color it in. So that was the humble beginnings of my teaching career, you know.
So you have more than one tie now?
I do. I have quite a few now. And, you know, that's out of necessity, too, because you never know when a stray, you know, drop of coffee was going to get on your tie. So you better make sure you have some in abeyance, you know?
My staff has actually bought me adult bibs to wear at lunch so I don't get my scrubs all dirty. So I totally understand.
You are in the same neighborhood that I reside. Thank you. Yep, absolutely.
So I can give you the skinny on how to get those bibs.
Absolutely.
So now you stayed with Diamond for quite some time, correct?
Sure. I was a call-in sub that became a permanent substitute in 1987. I did that until 1992. I briefly left education and went back to cooking for the state for about 6 months. A long-term substitute position opened up in 1993, and I filled that position. The gentleman who I filled in for, who I had just deep respect for, Mr. Thomas Aubin, you know, unfortunately passed in April of the next year. And so I became a contracted teacher officially in 93, 94 school year. And I did that until the 2000 year when I moved to Middleborough High School as the assistant principal.
Okay. Okay. So in the time that you've worked, it's only been, a couple of years.
Sure.
What has changed? Because I know when I sit there, I've got a 16-year-old, and I just hear so many folks talk about, oh, the stressors these kids have. And I'll be honest, I look and I think it's not very different. I mean, there's different variables, but it's the same stress we all had, I think. But what's your opinion on that?
Oh, God. Nancy, you told me you were going to throw me softballs and I wouldn't get in trouble. And you're going to get me in trouble on this question.
Right off the bat.
Right off the bat. So I will tell you that, I have and I'm not trying to be flippant about this because the mental health issues in this country are off the charts. And I don't think anybody will deny the fact that our services for our young people are woefully inadequate.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I think the mental health issues are real, and I think they need to be addressed. But with that being said, I agree with you that I try not to put qualifiers in the most stressful time because again, for people who grew up in the 60s, there was always the fear of nuclear annihilation, and in looking at some of the, Freedom of Information Act information that came out, it was clear that the 60s were a time where we were close, especially during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So,
right.
every in the 70s, it was gas issues. I go back to remember being with my mom and waiting in the gas lines and stuff like that.
Right.
Odd even days,
Well, I remember I grew up more so in the 80s in elementary school, and it was, the Russian war. And when Reagan got in, it was this concern of nuclear war and what was going to happen. So I think we've all had that. Yeah.
And there were, and you're right. There were proxy wars, even in our continent, in Honduras and El Salvador,
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with you. Yeah. I think, look, one of the things that I've talked to the building leadership about is, look, we can't be all things to all people because no one can. And if you try and do that, you're going to be very mediocre. And I just will not allow this district to be mediocre. And neither will the people in here. We have a mission that we need to do. So I've told the building leadership, the focus absolutely has to be on two critical concepts. One of them is persistence, the
Mm-hmm.
ability to persist under very harsh conditions, and then resilience. Because in the end, even for people who are well-heeled, they're going to experience death. They're going to experience loss. They're going to experience disappointment. And it's how we react to these events that really determine whether we're going to be successful moving forward. So we understand that there is a real mental health crisis and it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed sooner rather than later. And part of what we're trying to do is, get our young students engaged in extracurriculars that will provide an outlet for them.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've focused heavily on the academic, but we lose the enrichment piece to it. And so
I agree. I think that now kids are so focused on singular activities, whether it be playing video games or most kids play only one sport now, as opposed to we play it every season, something.
Yep.
I just find it's very focused, and maybe that's where the stress comes because everyone's expected to be good at that one thing.
The other thing was, growing up, and again, I don't want to sound like, when I went to school, I had to walk 2 miles uphill. I don't want to say that nonsense, but I will tell you that we didn't have a lot of things planned for us because, most of us were growing up in a single parent household where, quite frankly, working and putting food on the table was a stressor enough. So there was no expectation that our parents would, arrange and show up to every single event that we went to. Mm-hmm. And we understood that. There was a good deal of leaning on each other growing up in our neighborhood. And mm-hmm. I am so grateful to that, Nancy, because, not this past Sunday, but the Sunday previous, I was reliving my 20s and I went to go see a band in Somerville called Gang of Four. And, I went with a couple of my friends and these friends go back. One goes back to the 1970s. The other one goes back to 1968. And to have those long-term relationships is really a key to happiness as we get older. The Atlantic has done some research on this, and one of the major keys to success as one grows older is long-term relationships. So it was really wonderful, and it brought me back to how much time we spent together with summer, for example. I mean, there were times where basically being bored was actually a pretty good thing, in the sense that it allowed us to self-reflect a little bit.
Yep.
And really take a hard look at ourselves. I'm not saying it was always successful, but I think this planning events leads to a certain sort of dearth of self-reflection that we need to sort of focus on and get back to.
Right. I mean, I talked to my son about the days that we just used to leave in the morning and we'd come home when the lights went off, and would ride our bike and do whatever. And I mean, some of it you can't do anymore because society is just a little different when it comes to safety. But I just wish there were things like that for some of these kids.
Well, I talk about it all the time. Part of what made me, a staple in our Flint neighborhood was the bells from Notre Dame Church, and there were no cell phones. There were no, so you'd play basketball.
There was no tracking apps.
Right. I mean, you'd leave the house and you'd be gone for the day playing hoop, and then you'd come back at dinner time and, maybe have some dinner and then go back and do that again. And, again, there was a certain amount of, risk in anything you do, but this is what we did growing up. And we learned how to survive. We learned how to adjust. I think in trying to protect kids from or set up an artificial, situation leads to, a great deal of failure to launch moving forward, Yeah.
And I think I noticed that with friends who've got kids going off to college, and so many of them are struggling to be off on their own. And I remember going and not turning back and thinking that was the greatest thing ever. What do you feel is the school's role in this? And, what do you think's changed over the years that you now have to implement that maybe you didn't once do to help kids with this?
Oh God, where do I start? So let me start with, a topic that we're going to be broaching in the next couple of weeks with our school committee. It's the summer reading that every school, forces kids to do, and I say that, and I mean it, because I understand the rationale behind it. You don't want to have learning loss, or you want to mitigate learning loss. I get it completely. That being said, I always use my wife and myself as examples. If we were going to school today and we were assigned summer reading, she would have the summer reading done by the end of June because she's a type A personality and she's going to get it done. If I like the reading, I might get it done. If I don't like the reading, I'm definitely not getting it done. And then, either one of two things will happen. I'll cram to try and get it done. And what value did that have either way?
Right.
Assuming that, you got the reading done in June, there's a good chance that you're not, if you don't pick up anything, you're going to have equal learning loss. So, right. I liken it to, and again, I try not to make things as anecdotal as I do, but, we are the sum total of our experiences. So, I was very blessed to, grow up in a neighborhood where there was a store called Almond's Variety, and the McCartys were, Adelaide and Jean. And I was just a young, 8, 9 years old, and I would bop into the variety store. I didn't have any money, but they would let me peruse the magazines. So, I would hang there and I would read stuff like Sports Illustrated or Mad Magazine,
Yeah.
because, and I'm so grateful to them, because although that wouldn't be considered, quote unquote intellectual, although I would make the argument that Mad actually taught us satire better than any classroom we could ever sit in. It built the foundation so that when I did learn an appreciation for reading, that I had the baseline skills in order to move forward. So, how do you repay people who, let you hang around their variety store? And so I was very fortunate to And, I also had, my Uncle Jim and my Aunt Joanne, both of whom did not have a high school diploma. But they would, have me come up the house every couple of days during the week. And I'd be reading to them. And I know they were exhausted, looking back, exhausted, tired, bored, all of that stuff. But, that allowed me, again, to feel a sense of success that, I could build on moving forward. And I think we need to create challenges that will allow for success. But there's many different ways of doing it. And when we take a look at the literacy problem that we face, not only here in Westport, but, throughout the country, I am absolutely convinced that we need to tie some type of experiential activity that would, in fact, allow for that learning to stick. Right. So I was speaking with my middle school principal today, and we were talking about, about the possibility of doing experiential learning that we could then tie the science into. So, for example, having been an administrator at Diamond for 16 years, I did years and years of parking lot duty. And one of the things that happens with kids and their cars is they leave the lights on, which means the cars need to be jumped.
Yep.
It is amazing how we have students who drive vehicles who don't know how to open the hood, let alone jump start the vehicle. These are important skills, survival skills to have. And so this summer, I've challenged my building leadership to give me items that the students can do experientially and then read about simultaneously, so that there is sort of a stake in the land and the learning sticks.
Yep.
I don't think people understand, Nancy. It's crazy. I had a second grader, and during the height of the COVID, we filled in wherever we had to fill in administratively, or and I had a second grade student who left her book bag in her mother's car. So I said, no problem, we'll call mom. And so, what's your first name? She gave me her first name. And then, what's your last name? And she said it starts with a letter. She didn't know her last name in second grade.
Oh, wow.
And so, one of the things that I would certainly like to see at the lower level is to make sure that, in lieu of any sort of summer type of reading, that our students have the ability to identify their full names, spell their full name, spell the parents' names, where they live, telephone number, and because these are things that are really important. And unfortunately, they're not necessarily in the formal framework, but are really important in terms of practicality. And
I think life skills are so important. And I know this isn't the fault of the individual school systems. It's sort of the educational process, but things like home ec and woodshop and things like that taught us how to think critically and manage things. And I see so many today that come to work for me right out of school. They've never had a job. They don't know how to do anything. They don't know how to look for their first apartment. And it's just amazing to me that just simple tasks are like, well, my mom will have to do that. I'm thinking you're 22 years old.
Mom's not going to be there forever, unfortunately,
Right.
And it's stuff like reading an analog clock. And there's a whole host of, I know like very talented, nurses who, when it was time to buy a house, didn't know how to, write the checkout for the deposit with the submission. And you're like, wow. So, the challenge there, Nancy, is to figure out things that really do matter as opposed to things that boomers think matter, because what we think matters and what really matters sometimes are two different things,
Right. Yeah. My son and I, during COVID, my office was closed for 8 weeks and I didn't even take maternity leave. So I didn't know what to do with myself. So I made him do household tasks, like balance the checkbook with me and things like that. Cause I thought he'll need this someday. Let's use this educationally since he's not in school. So
we're starting a lecture series once a month. This month, we're going to be doing a forum on cybersecurity. The next month, we were talking about, possibly doing something. You're in a car accident. Now what?
Yep.
In May, we were thinking about doing something, especially for our seniors going on to college, called Beyond Ramen, the ability to cook a basic meal.
Yeah,
you know,
that's great.
because these are things that do matter. But sewing buttons,
Yeah.
we're working with the leadership team right now to see what we can offer our kids for the summer that would be experientially based. And once we have that and we have the interest, then we'll go to some of our auto dealerships and say, and see if we can, work with, for example, like a mechanic, to tell the kids, some of the basics that you need to do when you own an automobile.
Right. How to change a tire if you're on the side of the road.
Tire. I mean, AAA sounds great until it takes 2 hours for them to get there.
Right.
If you know how to change a tire, half hour, you might be out of there,
Right.
And when you're in a place like a highway or something like that, you need to get out of there,
Right.
So we're looking at really, look, Nancy, I want to revolutionize education, and we've got to have it experiential and meaningful, because otherwise we're going to lose kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I was speaking to the assistant principal who was, we're like a lot of other districts struggling for money. But we understand the importance of foreign language. So we talked about the possibility, is there grant money out there for the teaching of things like, Chinese or Mandarin,
Mm-hmm.
where, there is usually a huge market for our native speakers to learn these languages so that we can compete in an economic world.
Yeah, especially in the tech industries. Yeah, definitely.
No question about it. Yep, absolutely. So we've got so much to do here. And I will tell you, the big difference is when I didn't really worry as much about social issues as I did about education when I first started education. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
But now it's that balance, and you've got to, we've got to hold kids accountable, but at the same time understand that humans are very, fallible individuals who suffer at myriad times of their lives.
Right. Right. Now, from my understanding, you had taken over as the superintendent of Westport Community Schools mid-pandemic. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was like October of 2020 that the former superintendent took a leave, and eventually in December would officially be gone. But it was in October. Yep.
Okay. So tell me how that's been, because I mean, I know, owning a business, here you are, a leader trying to guide your team in a world where of something we don't even know what it is and what's happening. And it's so many uncertainties. Walk me through that.
Well, we were very fortunate here in the sense that, first of all, there was a terrific health and safety committee formed during the summer to, really take, and we had some heavy hitters on there. We were lucky to have, because we live in close proximity, we had Dr. Bromwich from UMass Dartmouth, who participated in our committee. And the recommendations we made were absolutely spot on. And so additionally, while that was happening during the summer, the school committee made the really sound decision to allow our extended day program to continue running uninterrupted all summer, in the summer of 2020.
Oh, wow.
They set the benchmark for what you have to do to, keep students safe. So, through that and through the health and safety committee, by the time school rolled around, we had already spent literally $500,000 on mitigation strategies, including, HEPA purifiers for all of our classrooms, which have to be maintained weekly.
Right.
And the result of that was our students got into school at the primary school. They got into September of 2020. At the middle school, I apologize. At the primary school, it was October of 2020. Mm-hmm. At the middle and high school, our high needs students were in right away. And then we were able to get everybody else in by February. And again, we were hoping to get them in sooner, and we would have, except that, one of the reasons we have a new school is that the school just could not fit the number of students we had. So,
right.
But we did what over 90% of the student schools could not do. And I'm certainly not being critical of them, because each school has their own unique set of challenges. But I'm just saying that I'm darn proud of what we did here in Westport to bring the kids in. And, it's a credit to this whole community.
Right. Right. Sounds like everyone worked as a team.
They really did. And, our teachers, at the elementary and primary level, they really, again, set the standard and allowed for people to know that we could do this at the upper levels as well. So
That's great. Now, what do you feel at the end of all of this? And hopefully we're getting close to that. What's going to happen, or what has happened to education because of this? Do you feel that kids will be behind? Or, I have a lot of friends who are parents who are worrying about this. And I just keep saying the kids are all in the same boat, at least. It's not like one classroom is going to be so far ahead, but what concerns are you seeing?
Well, I think the biggest concerns really are the emotional aspect of it first. Obviously learning loss is something that took place regardless of whether what you were in or not, because you just couldn't conduct the business of education as you normally would. There was clearly time lost relative to, mask breaks and, additional time to separate people in the cafeteria. So there were a whole bunch of things, but, I'm a big fan of a gentleman by the name of Scott Galloway, who wrote a book called Post-Corona. And his premise is that the pandemic really set the stage for trends that were already happening, but accelerated them significantly. And he cites, for example, it took Apple, I think, 30 years to be worth $1 trillion. And then in the 8 months of the pandemic, they now became worth $2 trillion. So they doubled in value in an 8-month period that previously had taken 30 years. There are certainly going to be winners and losers. There's no question about it. I think one of the things that I'm really concerned about is that in an effort to try and survive, we haven't looked long-term at how we're going to deal with this again. It's coming. Right. It's not if, it's when. And if you take a look at the reports in Hong Kong, China, and even the UK right now, it looks like an Omicron variant is now wreaking havoc in those countries right now. So I think a number of different things have to take place. I think strong public schools have to offer and be prepared to proficiently teach in a distance learning setting. We have a number of students who are now being hospitalized because of, mental health issues. Those students, every day they're not in class is a day of education lost. And so if we can, have the technology and the training necessary to provide them, not that we want to encourage them to stay out, but we also want them to feel, part of the school environment.
Right.
And, so I think the challenge districts face is that the pandemic has made us focus even more on each individual is a unique organism that we need to look at and provide as many opportunities for them to have success. Yeah. I always tell the story, Nancy, when I first did cafeteria duty as a administrator, I would always look at, a student who was sitting by themselves, and, early on, I would lament how sad they must be and how lonely they must be. And, I'd go up to them and try and have conversations with them. And, I'll call this one student Victoria. And Victoria said to me straight as an arrow, she said, I just like being alone. And, for a social animal like myself, it was really hard to process. Right. And it taught me that I can be so egocentric, even at an older age, where I thought I was moving up the ladder of self-actualization, Well,
I think it's so hard as humans. We always assume people are just like us. Because who wouldn't want to be, right?
Oh my God, the bias. And it's, it's so hard. And that's where I think the time to reflect on oneself is really important. So, there are issues like that I think are the ones that we have to deal with. I'm extremely concerned about some of the culture war issues that are going on right now that I think on the surface sound reasonable, but when you dig deeper and get into the nuanced areas of these, debates, fights, whatever you want to call them, there's a less than noble less than noble agenda that's trying to be put forward. So these are other challenges that we face going forward. I always say that the thing I loved about going to SMU was that you could have an alternative viewpoint and you were not, canceled. It was understood.
Right.
And I think these issues are really important to discuss if we're going to get, to me, the ultimate issue is the critical thinking that our students need. And how do we do that? I just, for example, if you take a look at Reconstruction, which to me is the most important history outside of the Constitutional Convention and things, is the most important aspect of American history moving forward, because Reconstruction set the stage for the Jim Crow era in the late 19th century. And of course, the civil rights movement throughout the 20th century. And it's still happening today. And, it's always kind of fun to think, how different would it have been if Lincoln had not been killed, in April of 1865? Again, Lincoln, allowed the Army, or requested the Army play Dixie at the signing of Appomattox. He said because he liked the song.
Right. Yeah, we're still hanging on to it.
But, it's just, I tell people thematically, the Civil War was the final act of the Constitutional Convention. And that, they couldn't resolve that sticky issue of, and I'm not even talking about slavery. I'm talking about the counting of blacks for the purposes of representation in the House of Representation. So when you take a look at what was decided, they decided on a 3/5 compromise. And again, I don't want to get into the marvels of counting an individual as 3/5 of a person. We don't have to debate that issue. We understand that was completely unacceptable. But it does, if you look at it more critically, give you an idea that at the start of our country, the South was more powerful than the North. Otherwise, the compromise would have been the 1/2 compromise or the 2/5 compromise. But as industrialization started taking place, you see a power shift that is going from the South to the North. And, so if you look at the events leading to the election of Lincoln in 1860, there were a number of really critical events, including, the Compromise of 1850, which, allowed for California to enter the Union as a free state. That upset the 15-15 balance, free states versus slave states, in the Senate. And so, clearly, when you look at it from a political point of view, I don't think we should just look at the Civil War in terms of one item, but we should be able to look at it through a myriad of glasses without and allow people to ask the questions without being castigated or called, something as a result of that curiosity.
Well, I found lately too, they just stick with party lines and they can't think of a reasonable or realistic thought or have an opinion that varies from that or change an opinion. It's like no one's allowed to grow. And I know when you're young, we all think one way. As you age, you have experiences that tend to change your opinions on things. I feel like we're kind of stuck. No one's allowed to change. This is what you think is what you have to think.
Well, Churchill very aptly said that if you're not a liberal in your 20s, you have no heart, and a conservative in your 30s, you have no head. So, there's plenty of history which teaches us. I am a much different person than I was 2 years ago, and I'm a much different person. And that was the thing that I absolutely loved about, college when I went. I am so grateful. I went to college for all the wrong reasons, but thank God I went because it really, it changed me as an individual in such a way that I really understood that things are just not, they're not thumbs up and thumbs down.
Right. It's not that simple.
And one of the things that the pandemic should have taught all of us is that in many cases, there are no good answers, but we need to manage a paradox as opposed to finding a solution.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed.
So yeah, I am passionate about public education. I think it has saved the middle class in this country. And I think the middle class is something that needs, we talk about it tongue in cheek and we give it lip service, but, if liberal democracy, and I don't mean liberal versus conservative, but, the thought that human beings are endowed with certain rights, that, then democracies are going to have to survive. And in order to do it, we need a strong, public school, I think K through college system that doesn't afford people the joy of getting an education at the expense of putting another mortgage on your back. Because
Right.
when you look at 1 trillion in student debt,
It's gotten out of hand, that's for sure.
well, again, costs have gone up. And again, estimates are 1,100 to 1,400% since 1980, higher than healthcare.
Right. Right. And I'm going to age myself here. I mean, I went to college. I paid my own way. I worked jobs. I paid my way through school. My parents couldn't afford that. Those days are gone. I mean, kids can't do that.
Well, you know what, though? It was unbelievable marketing by the schools. Although again, I don't want to completely blame them, because state schools have been drained of funding year after year. And so, I tell people, my first semester at SMU was $700. Yep. If I bombed out, and I came close, I'll be honest with you, Nancy, if I bombed out after that first year, I tried like anything to bomb out. I would only be in debt $1,400. You do that today, even at Bristol Community College, you're carrying a $12,000 debt. Yep. And so, I tell parents, I remember telling my mom that I was going to college, and her response to me was, "That is wonderful." And she was absolutely right. She was in her 40s and paying a mortgage. I wasn't her responsibility there was no obligation for her to pay for my college. And I'm so glad that she said that to me, because, I think, after the, great dining rooms and great dorms and activities go away, there's a reality that in 6 months upon graduation, you're going to start paying these loans.
Yep.
So that's why we're working very heavily, Nancy, on putting over the next couple of years a K through 12 financial literacy program. That's here great. At Westport. And we're also going to try and tie a digital literacy piece to it, because we can talk about how to build wealth all day long. But what you really need to fight is that unbelievable endorphin rush that you get when you get home. And there is another birthday gift for you, courtesy of Amazon.
Yeah.
And that is a real challenge that I see our kids facing going forward.
Well, their thoughts of what our needs and what our wants are very much skewed, I find.
Well, I've caught myself, and I don't know if you've, but I mean, I've had to stop myself and say, I don't need this. What am I doing?
Amazon comes to my house every day. I'm very guilty of this.
No, and listen, listen, they are insidiously brilliant. That model is insidiously brilliant. But, at some point we have to take a hard look at what we're doing. Even the discussions about inflation. I tell people there are some things we can't get away from. We can't get away from the cost of heating and things like that. But there's a lot of things that we can do to curtail some expenses, and we still would not lose much of a quality of life.
Right.
You could eat 4 ounces or 6 ounces of chicken as opposed to 12 ounces of chicken.
Right.
You can say one of the things that is really going to determine our ability to survive is our ability to sacrifice in dire times. I always look to the sacrifices that were made throughout the eras, and we've gotten very comfortable, including myself. I mean, the idea of driving a car with a seat warmer, I thought I hit nirvana. And
now you can't live without it, though.
Oh my God, yeah, they've made me soft in some respects, but but I mean, these are real concerns on the part of the average person. But I think it's important for us to collectively go, okay, what are the things that we can cut back on without losing quality of life? But at the same time, mollify these incredible, this is going to drop at some point, but it's not going to be tomorrow, especially with the conflict going on in Ukraine right now.
Correct. And you'd think that with the pandemic, it would have put things into perspective of what truly is important. But I feel like it was sort of a blip in our day.
That was, part of that. And again, it's only my supposition here, but, first of all, the 24-hour news cycle has led to, and I'm not picking on one, but CNN has breaking news every time they come back on. Right. If it's breaking news every time, then it's not breaking news, And so, we've got to take a good hard, again, the deciphering what's real from what's not real is a real challenge. And, I think if there is one thing that we have to learn, especially in light of the unity that's been taking place with NATO and the EU as a result of this horrible invasion, is that, we need collectively to work together and stop the castigation of one another.
Right.
Because, this is Putin's MO is to divide and conquer. And he did an exceptional job using social media in order to do that. And, I know that, many people, well, we need to ban, I get it. But wouldn't it have been better if we could have looked through this and said, this doesn't sound right. We need to look at this a little bit further.
Right. Let's think critically about
it. Yeah. I mean, again, there's a whole host of reasons why that's not taking place. I mean, social media, it's about likes and dislikes. And, when in fact, while consensus may seem comfortable, in fact, sometimes consensus leads to bad decision-making. Yep. And so you've got to be able to think for yourself sometimes. And that's a challenging thing to do today.
That is for sure. So on the last note I want to cover is, what are your goals for the next 5 years in the Westport Community Schools, and where do you see things headed?
Sure. So one of the major thrusts, when I came here, I was hoping to start what's called Chapter 74 programs, technical programs here at the school, because the market for students in the arenas like advanced manufacturing, medical, engineering, they're off the charts. Electric Boat, I think, was looking for 700 welders. The vocational schools cannot meet those needs alone. And so I was hoping to start programs here. Unfortunately, space and money are two problems that basically put the kibosh on that. But we're not going to allow that to stop looking at another paradigm. And so the paradigm we're looking at is a 5 through 12 model that within the school schedule, we will build in selectives that will lead to some sort of certification, because the trend in education now is micro certifications. Businesses can't wait 2 and 4 years for people. Right. So these micro certifications, we're hoping kids can obtain starting in grade 5 all the way up to grade 12. And by grade 12, we're going to have a schedule change that we hope will allow for students to satisfy in the first half of their senior year all of their graduation requirements, so they can focus on either early college or a career pathway in their second semester. Because one of the things that I absolutely loved about vocational education was cooperative education.
I'm sure the kids loved it too.
Well, it clears the pathway. It lets you know whether this is something I want to pursue moving forward, or this isn't for me, and gives you enough time to have a plan B, as opposed to going, I don't know what I'm doing here. You know,
I just spent 4 years in.
and again, when you look at the numbers, 1 out of 3 students who graduate from a vocational school are going to go into the trade, which means 66, 67% are not. So, and it stands to reason. You choose your program at the age of 14. I chose culinary arts because I heard it was fun and you could eat for free. And that was a selling point for me. But should it be the basis on which somebody chooses a career? Probably not,
Right. Well, my son chose the high school he went to because they had good chicken nuggets. So, I mean, anything's possible.
Food is, and we're working on that as well. We're working on a farm to table program here to improve the quality of our kids' food. That is another thing that the pandemic has made clear. We've got to have quality food available to our kids through a supply chain that is localized, as opposed to dependent on,
Well, and Westport has so many great farms just right nearby the school.
The resources are there. It's the capacity building. So for the next 5 years, improve food, a stronger school to career pathway, upping our game in terms of college pathway, and increasing the number of offerings for students, both sports and non-sport. If we can get a debate club here, I'm in. Yep. If we can get a ukulele club, I'm in. Right. The success of any school can be measured by how long the kids stay after the school day ends. And if they're sticking around, there's a very good chance they're not engaging in behaviors that could be detrimental going forward.
Yep.
And for some of our kids where the home life isn't the best, it's a great escape to understand that there is a world outside of the, challenges that they face within their own families.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. Now I got to ask, since you were a culinary arts major, do you still love to cook?
My wife is a phenomenal cook, and I couldn't be happier that she is. I did the trade throughout my years in teaching, and administration. I bartended, I cooked commercially, and I did catering. So that education was not lost. I mean, it was definitely, and if I had to go back to it, I certainly could. At my tender age now, I can't imagine 12 hours on my feet, 5 days a week,
Restaurant work is not easy. I give those folks a lot of credit.
And the other thing is, I'm an early person now. So this going to bed at 2 a.m. would never work,
I used to waitress. I think, how did I stay up that late?
Oh my God. I was talking to my wife the other day about the fact that when we used to go out, 11 o'clock was early.
Correct.
So
I can't even remember the last time I've seen 11.
Oh my God. I did. I actually relived my youth. I went to Somerville to go see a band called Gang of Four, and I stayed out till 11 o'clock, and I paid for it the next week.
I was going to say, yeah. How long did it take to recover?
A week. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I want to say thank you, Tom. I really appreciate this opportunity to get to know you, get to know your vision for the schools. And Westport's a wonderful town, so I think having you at the helm is going to be great and do great things moving forward as well.
Well, we're going to do our best. I love the community. I love the people, and they deserve a top-notch school district, and we're going to do it. We got great people, and we're going to move it forward. So I thank you so much for giving me the time to speak. And anytime you want to come by the school, we could take you for a tour or any of our schools or any events, and we'd love to show you what we're doing.
Great. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you very much.